Musailima's warriors, seeing the opportunity, tightened around their leader. They began withdrawing deeper into the orchards and irrigated fields that surrounded Yamama, drawing Khalid's infantry into terrain that favored the defender. The narrow lanes between groves broke the Muslim line into small clusters, forcing commanders to shout orders through the din and making it difficult for the reserve to see where reinforcement was most needed. What had begun as a typical field engagement now devolved into bitter, close-quarters fighting. Men stumbled over irrigation channels, clashed in the shadow of palm trunks, and were forced to hack through narrow choke points where a handful of defenders could stall dozens. The very farms the Banu Hanifa worked became natural fortifications, waist-high walls and thick brush checked advances, and allowed defenders to vanish and reappear among the fruit trees. Khalid understood immediately that cohesion was slipping. He rode to the rear of the line and ordered his center to halt pursuit and reform in broader ranks, then dispatched messengers to the wings to maintain lateral alignment. The objective was not simply to advance, but to re-establish a battlefield front instead of allowing the engagement to dissolve into isolated duels. Slowly, the line corrected, tightening around the groves where Banu Hanifa fighters had concentrated. Inside those orchards, Musailima repositioned his force for a final stand. He established a defensive pocket around a walled garden, later remembered as Hadaqat al-Maut, the Garden of Death. Its entrances were narrow and easily defended, and inside its walls, Musailima gathered a sizable contingent of fighters, including his most loyal clansmen. Their objective was simple and brutal: hold long enough to break the morale of Khalid's advance. The losses mounted quickly in this phase of the battle. Many of Khalid's veterans were forced into frontal assaults against fighters who refused to yield an inch of ground. The chroniclers emphasized the toll on those who had memorized large portions of the Quran. These men, reluctant to withdraw or abandon comrades, pressed forward and were cut down in the thick of the fight. Later sources speak of hundreds among this group falling before the day was over. Numbers not recorded with precision, but universally remembered for their heaviness. Khalid, seeing the bloodletting and recognizing that piecemeal assaults were wasting his best men, shifted tactics. He ordered the wings to collapse inward and push the defenders toward the garden enclosure, compressing the fighting into a single containable block. This maneuver required coordination under fire, yet the veterans on the line managed it, shouting to one another to maintain the arc and drive their opponents in the chosen direction. The retreat of Musailima's men was not a rout. It was a grim, stubborn withdrawal. They fought guarding one another's backs, dragging wounded relatives with them through the orchards. Only when severely pressed did they break through the narrow entrances of the walled garden. Once inside, they slammed the makeshift barriers closed behind them and prepared for the final siege. Khalid halted the advance rather than immediately storming the enclosure. He understood the danger of funneling his troops into a narrow kill zone where the defenders could cut them down at leisure. Instead, he dismounted with several of his officers and surveyed the walls, searching for weak points and counting enemy archers as they appeared along the parapets. Outside the garden, the field grew quiet except for the groans of the wounded and the distant calls of men searching for comrades. Inside, Banu Hanifa fighters gathered around Musailima, nursing wounds and catching their breath. They knew the next assault would determine not only the outcome of the battle, but the survival of their leader's claim. The siege of the Garden of Death was about to begin.